Exclusively on Secular Media Network, this is the Atheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Atheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined by my co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Yeah, what do you want? I said, you got any glazed donuts? He said, no, we're out of glazed donuts. I said, you got any
Weird
jelly donuts?
Albuquerque.
It is indeed. You're so smart.
Wow, I'm glad somebody got the reference, because I'm apparently too old. Or not young enough. I don't know. Because I feel... Yeah, never mind. That's an entirely different discussion.
both of those are wrong.
So, the Democratic National Convention was last week, and
Yay!
Gosh, it was a whole lot of fun. So, I feel like we're all liberal folks here. We're all progressive folks. We're all left-leaning folks, and I think until relatively recently, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just because I was only sort of mildly political aware until a couple of years ago. But it always seemed to me like people who were kind of sort of mainstream progressives could always be like, yeah, like Democrats, like I'm good with that. Like I can. There's plenty I disagree with, but like, yeah, I can kind of get behind that. And lately, it just seems like that is just not the case. And I mean, I'm kind of feeling that too, to be completely honest. And so this whole thing was really, really interesting for me. Because obviously, speeches are awesome. The speeches at the DNC were fantastic. The president, the first lady,
she killed it.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton, fantastic speeches. I mean, Barack Obama is probably one of the best orators of our time, like hands down.
When he's not going,
Right. But when you get past all of that stuff, and when you get past the pomp and the circumstance and all that, we have to get down and talk about substance. So that's the discussion that I want to have this week. And so we have Thomas from Atheistically Speaking on the show. Welcome, sir.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we have Eli Bosnick from God Awful Movies and Scathing Atheist.
who
What's up,
never
Eli?
ever goes away.
Thanks for. I'm on every episode. It's just this one I'm going to talk.
Well, I'm not allowed to go places without Eli. He has to kind of. It's a long story. You know what? I'm not going to get into it. But yeah, that's
your
a reason.
package deal.
For legal reasons, he can't talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, obviously a stark contrast between the RNC and the DNC. And I feel like that's duh, because the party in power is always going to talk about, like, oh, this is super hopeful, and here's all the progress we've made, and here's how it's going to continue. And the party that's not in power is going to, oh my God, this has been a complete effing disaster. This is the worst thing that's ever happened, But I feel like the RNC was, even a little far for that dynamic. It was very much like, I got the impression just from listening to Donald Trump's speech that this guy is living in a world where black and brown people are going to kill and rape all of your children, and that, police officers have guns to their heads constantly. Like, just this awful dystopian vision of what the United States is. And to be fair, I think the DNC had a very sort of unrealistically optimistic view of this, great thing where, everybody has opportunity and all is well if you work hard, which I think is probably equally untrue, but at least, I don't know, feels better.
And that's all we care about as skeptics. We don't care about what's true, just what makes you feel good.
Well, there were things that really, genuinely made me feel positive, like seeing a transgender person speak at the DNC, right? Like,
yes,
representation is the beginning, right? Representation is not like, oh, so they've got their token trans, we're good on trans stuff now. Obviously, that's silly. But seeing someone who shares that background with me addressing the DNC, that's huge. And seeing people with disabilities, I mean, I can only imagine growing up as a kid with a disability being, thinking that, you're never going to be able to amount to more than, somebody that somebody looks down on, for the rest of your life. And you have people with disabilities on stage addressing the DNC. Like, that's got to be huge.
And even if it is if there is a tokenizing element to it, even if they weren't intending that, I mean, at least they thought of inviting, people from different life experiences, whereas the RNC would never think that, except for the black guy telling everyone that black people are terrible.
Right. Or the gay guy saying,
gay people.
Yeah. So anyways, Eli, let's start with you. What overall thoughts? How you feeling after the whole thing?
I mean, honestly, I felt pretty good about the DNC in the later nights. The scariest thing about the DNC for me was the people shouting down a sharecropper's son because they wanted to talk about no TTP. People calling for roll call votes, burning your bust people walking out. That's what's terrifying to me. And Thomas actually had a brilliant episode, which I recommend everyone listen to recently, called President Trump. So what was scary to me about the DNC was the knowledge that we may be too busy fighting amongst ourselves to fight off one of the most damaging presidencies of the last 50 to 100 years. And that was really scary. I live tweeted the entire RNC, and I made it about 2 hours into the DNC, and it was when they were interrupting the sharecropper's son, and he was saying, my father, a sharecropper, and a man who were, and there was just white people in the corner going, no TTP, no TTP, just shouting that speaker down that I couldn't watch anymore, because I can watch the Republicans self-destruct and have a preacher leave an all lives matter call and response, but when the good guys in the story are fighting among themselves, like Marvel Civil War is a lot harder to watch than Batman fighting the Joker.
Right. That's fair.
And it's a huge, and I completely, so I already have yelled into both of your Facebooks. I completely disagree with both the guests that you had talking about the Green Party and Jill Stein and Bernie and Bust and all that sort of stuff. It requires, and I love Jabari, and I will admit that I'm very biased towards his ideas because...
You were the one who suggested he come on the show,
yes,
by the way.
And he's educated... Yes, and he's educated me.
You did this, Eli.
He educated me as to a lot of social justice, and to Dan's credit, he has since walked back a couple of the things he's wrong about in a blog, and that really speaks to his skepticism and intellectual integrity. But the idea that introducing a party that has defined itself by disrupting elections, by going outside the mainstream, by pandering to the least scientific, silliest ideas of the left, that somehow giving them power or a voice is a good thing, is crazy to me. I mean, even if we assume that next year, okay, they can't do it this year because we're going to do smart state voting, which, by the way, the Green Party does not advocate for. They don't say, hey, don't vote for us when you're in a swing state. They say, vote for us because Jill Stein can be president, which she fucking can't, but Trump fucking can. Sorry
enough.
To say that the Greens...
And Thomas, let's hear your assessment.
Oh, what? Oh, so no, I was just going to listen to Eli the whole time. No, yeah, well, I can't pretend okay. My show, for anyone who's not familiar, is oftentimes about getting both sides in and really engaging the issue from all sides. And I've tried to do that with this, but this is one thing where I just think people are normalizing Trump too much. That is my main fear of this entire election. People are fitting this election into their normal picture of, oh, well, we got a Democrat on one side and we got a Republican on one side. And, there's some problems with Hillary and her email and her, Benghazi and blah, blah, blah. And and people, I don't think, are realizing that Trump is truly a historically terrible person to be running. It's on a whole new level. He's legitimately has some like narcissistic kind of, even psychopathic kind of tendencies in what he says. He's profoundly uncurious. He doesn't, if you read that article in the New Yorker about the guy who wrote his book, I highly recommend that.
It did, yeah. I'm going to put that, and I'll put that in the description box, because it's a great article.
it so completely comports with everything we see publicly about Trump. It's one thing if someone put out a hit piece and it was like, well, sure, you've seen this guy in public and he seems fine, but in the background there's all these, that could be made up, that could be exaggerated, whatever. But that guy's article so truly and clearly illuminates what's happening and what we're seeing that I, for one, am totally convinced by it. He spent a ton of time with Trump ghostwriting his book, and he said Trump is he can't focus. He has no focus. He's so narcissistic that unless things are being discussed that he wants, or that, it's about him or elevating him or his business deals or whatever, he can't even focus on it. The author suspects he hasn't read a book in his adult life, something that I could highly believe. I mean, and to contrast that, the author even mentions that George Bush had like a book reading sort of contest with a friend of his, and they read a ton. And you might hate Bush, you might think he's dumb. I don't think Bush was as dumb as people made him out to be. I think it was more that he was very challenged in terms of speaking, public speaking, and just couldn't. I think he actually is a somewhat intelligent guy. We can argue about that if you want. But Trump is on a whole different level, and we can't normalize this. We can't, in my view. And Eli's right. Check out President Trump to that episode to get more of a picture than I'll have time to go into here. But in my view, we cannot let this man be president. It's not. It may be one thing if it were Kasich was the nominee for Republicans or something. It would still be terrible. We would still have to worry about Supreme Court justices, which is a huge, huge thing. We would still have to worry about his views on Planned Parenthood. Kasich had terrible views on Planned Parenthood and abortion and all that. But it would be different.
He defunded Planned Parenthood in Ohio. I have a friend who actually lost their job as a domestic violence advocate. He wasn't even doing anything that had anything at all to do with abortion.
It's absurd. Yeah, absolutely. And if it were a more normal, it would still be a debate. I could say then, okay, Kasich versus Clinton, look, maybe you want to vote third party because worst case scenario, Kasich presidency, maybe he's not able to fund Planned Parenthood nationally, maybe, I don't know. It's still, personally, even if I thought Jill Stein or Gary Johnson were a better candidate than Hillary, I still would vote Hillary because it's just too much of a risk to hand a vote over to the other side. But with Trump, it's not even close. It's not even close. I submit that everybody who thinks it's okay to vote Jill Stein or Gary Johnson in a swing state, by the way, it's one thing if you're in, I'm in California, I could probably vote whoever, it doesn't really matter. If you're in a state where it could be close, it's impossible to risk that. We cannot risk what would happen with the Trump presidency. And I think anyone who is willing to do that is just underestimating how bad Trump is. And they're not keeping the proper focus in their mind of what Hillary is, with the downsides of Hillary that they blow up way too much, and the downsides of Trump, which I think they minimize too much.
Yeah, I keep thinking back to John McCain, and when he was at that campaign event, and this little old lady stood up and was calling Barack Obama a Muslim, and implying that he was a terrorist. And this is a guy who had the integrity to say no, we're not going to go there. This is a guy who is a decent family man. He's an American who believes in our values, but we have fundamental political disagreements about the way things should go. And obviously, I didn't agree with much of anything he had to say about anything else, but you can tell that's a guy who at least has integrity, and he recognizes that we can't do things like that. And I mean, you're completely right, and that's. I keep fighting this battle because, Eli, something that you said when you were talking was, you're talking about infighting and fighting amongst each other. And I think part of the problem, and we can talk about whether or not this is justified, but I think what it feels like a lot of times is, the people who are really behind Bernie Sanders, myself included, don't really feel like it's us. In the broader Democratic establishment, I think the folks who would get behind a candidate like Bernie don't feel like they're part of the rest of the group. And I think that's part of the reason that they feel so disenfranchised. And that doesn't justify, shouting down, the son of a sharecropper on the DNC stage by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if we're talking about the broader conversation, I can understand why these people are so angry and why these people are looking for something else. But for me, what it comes down to is I am more afraid of Trump than I dislike Hillary, if that makes sense. Like, Hillary Clinton is a person who, I've done kind of a deep dive, like really, really looking into her. And there's plenty of things that I disagree with, plenty of things that I flat out don't like. But I think the level of vitriol that's been lobbed at her, we expect it from the conservative side of the establishment. Like, of course that's going to happen. One, because she's a woman, but two, just because she's a Democrat and she's the Democratic presidential nominee. That's a thing we expect. But the people who are, left-leaning or progressive, further left than she is, I don't think that's a thing that we have quite ever seen before. And that's the thing that bothers me is just the complete lack of interest and nuance in the conversation, because so often what you hear is the minute someone opens their mouth and says, you know what, not a fan of Clinton, but I'm going to vote for her because I'm really scared of Trump. Immediately you're dogpiled with Hillary's shit because this, I hate Hillary because this, on and on and on. And it's like, well, I wasn't saying I'm a fan. I'm just saying I'm really mortally terrified of a Trump presidency, so this is what I'm doing with my vote. And then conversely, you see when someone even dares to criticize Clinton, let alone, mention anything about what they're going to do with their vote, they say, here's this thing that Hillary Clinton did once that I really don't like, that's kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. They're immediately shouted down by, what do you want Trump to win?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
And I think both of those things are equally unhelpful, because just like when, there was the big conversation when the Black Lives Matter activists took over the Bernie Sanders rally. And the argument was, the people who are our allies are the ones that we need to post up and put the pressure on, because they're the ones who are going to listen, right? And in moving that to this context, we have to put the pressure on the DNC, and we have to put the pressure on Hillary Clinton and let them know, like, no, this is stuff that we don't like. You're not representing us on these issues. We can do that and still acknowledge that, those things aside, we have to prevent a Trump presidency.
My answer to that is actually probably very different than most people's, which is that the people who criticize Hillary Clinton most likely don't understand what a political legacy of 41 years looks like, or what the system that we currently work with looks like, and the way to apply. So no one has proven themselves to be more progressive and more open to change this year than the Democrats, right? We have to look at the reality of this situation. A Democratic Socialist, someone who was outside of party, joined the party this year and vastly moved the platform. The Dems have given us marriage equality. The Dems have given us Obamacare. The Dems have single-handedly dragged progress to the left for the last 30-something years with nothing but people trying to stop them on the other side of the aisle. Bipartisanship in this country is a joke. And so when we say, I feel betrayed or I have these issues with Hillary Clinton, usually what I'm hearing is people who either don't understand how larger political landscapes where billions and billions of dollars are at stake work. So like people talk about her donors and the fact that she's taken, billions of dollars over the years. But what people tend not to understand is that in those situations, whatever money goes to the DNC, yes, they use it to get Hillary elected, but then that trickles down to the local elections. That trickles down to your state senators and your congressmen. And that's why the amount of money that she takes matters. So when people say things like get money out of politics, what they fail to understand about that is that the whole system relies on a lot of grease to get these progressive ideas working from the ground up. And as for her war hawking and her positions, she's the Secretary of State in one of the most difficult times to be in that position. You would not find, and I challenge anybody to find me a Secretary of State with anywhere near her experience who doesn't have blood on their hands the way Hillary does. I mean, but what she has demonstrated is a tremendous amount of competency and a tremendous amount of restraint and allyship when she did not need to and has not need to. You know, she was always crushing Bernie. And look, I was Bernie all the way. I loved Bernie, but from pretty early on, it was very obvious that Bernie was losing by a lot with pretty much every community, and she still allowed herself to be pulled left. So when people talk about, I feel like I want to stop Trump. Obviously I want to stop Trump, and that's the overwhelming reason. But the other reason is because Hillary has proven herself over and over, and the Democrats have proven themselves over and over again to be open to change and to be open to making that change real. The Greens and the Libertarians don't get anything done. They stop change more than they start it. And I want to go with the party that gave me marriage equality. I want to go with the party that gave me Obamacare. I don't want to go with the party who specializes in getting despots elected in the name of standing there with their arms crossed across their chest.
Fair enough, Thomas.
Oh, absolutely. I think, it's really hard to put anything better than Eli does. I mean, I think you really nailed it there. I would say the only thing I would say slightly differently is I'm thinking of it more in terms of the philosophy of, even if Hillary were bad, even if Hillary had some things about her we didn't like, it's still, Trump is so bad that we just can't let it happen. And it's fine to use both these arguments, and I think they're going to appeal to different crowds. But one thing I would say about Hillary in terms of when she was Secretary of State is I'm not too thrilled about the job she did, to be honest with you. Like, I don't, right when she got out, Kerry, Kerry gave us the Iran deal, gave us relations with Cuba again. Like, he did. It was amazing that within like a month of her leaving and Kerry assuming office, he did all these things that she couldn't do. Now you could argue maybe she loosened it for him. I don't know.
Right. So there's the jelly jar of politics, right? She started.
Yeah. So, but even still, I mean, these things, we can quibble about these things. They're minor things. And I think Eli put it beautifully that the party that gave us all these things, we got to go with. I mean, it's not close. And I think what happens is there are certain people, and I'll come right out and say it, it's the people who are going to be least affected by Trump. And I think Eli has really made this point well. And I'm stealing it from Eli, so I'll give him credit. But the people who are okay with saying, well, but Hillary's so bad, we just need to go third party or whatever. We just need Trump to he'll shake things up. It's like, sure, shaking things up is great when you're not the one getting, shaken to death.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to just say, like, yeah, well, look at how bad Hillary is, and kind of shut off your mind to the nuance of that. But let's look at how bad Hillary is. I'm happy to have that conversation. What has she lied about? I pointed out a couple things in my show that I don't agree with her with. I think she blamed Benghazi on the stupid ass YouTube film that someone made. That was The Innocence of Muslims or whatever. There's just bullshit. Like, there's no reason. It is true that, lots of Muslims did riot over that film, but they are completely wrong to do that. Like, that is an idiotic reaction to a poorly made, a YouTube clip that would be too terrible to even do on god-awful movies. That's how dumb it is. Like, you wouldn't even
I saw
be able
It's pretty bad.
And the idea that that Muslims reacted to it the way they did is absurd. So I don't like that Hillary made that link. It's, she allegedly, and it's somewhat substantiated, though we don't know for sure. We can't say it for sure. She allegedly told the two different, I think, victims' family members during, I think, the funeral for Benghazi victims or something, that they were gonna get the filmmaker, like that he was the one to really go after for Benghazi, which is nonsense. And I don't like that. It's absolute nonsense. It's again not 100% substantiated. We don't know for sure, but it does seem like she approached it that way for a few weeks after Benghazi, that the filmmaker was the person we should be concerned about, which is absurd. She also lied a little bit about her emails, but like, what are these lies? Are these drastic? Like, compare this to Trump, who says whatever he wants. All his language is, Trump, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. We're going to do this. Like, he has no substance. He says, I'm going to be president. I'm going to be the great president. I'm going to be the best. You know how I'm going to be president? Really goodly. That's how. Like, it's just, he's nothing. There's nothing.
He would not have said goodly. He would have said good.
I'm going to be president good. I'm going to be a good.
The things she lies about are not really substantive policy things. Like, I'm not worried. Ask yourselves, again, to go with what Eli was saying, ask yourselves of her platform, of the things she wants to accomplish. Are you really worried that she's going to like go 180 degrees the opposite into, like, we're worried, oh, she's influenced by big money. But all that means is that we're worried about something she's going to do in office. What do you think is the worst case there? And is it worse than Trump? Not even close. Like, maybe she'll, not go after big banks quite enough or something. Like, is that as bad as some of the things that Trump could do? No way. So what, to put a final thought on it, what I would say is, if you can go to isidewith.com or something where you evaluate your beliefs and your stances, and you side with Trump more than Hillary, then congratulations, vote for Trump. Like, I can't tell you anything different. Like, if you really, truly side with his alleged positions more. But if you side with Hillary more than Trump, even if that's 90% and Jill Stein is 92%, you need to realize Jill Stein has no chance, and that 2% isn't a big fucking deal, and you need to suck it up and vote for Hillary if you're in a swing state.
For condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church. You're born in sin. He's not being condemned for what he does, he's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church. Unanswered questions. Amazing. No one, though they were asked repeatedly, would say whether they thought Stephen Fry, my friend, was in a state of mortal sin or not. They wouldn't tell you. Something about the question brought out their inner coward. Well, I say that homosexuality is not just a form of sex, it's a form of love, and it deserves our respect for that reason. That when my children were young, I'd have been proud to have Stephen as their babysitter, and I'd told them they were lucky. And if anyone came to my door as a babysitter wearing holy orders, I'd call first a cab and then the police.
You know where Saskatchewan is? Probably not. It's in Canada. If you do, you might know a city named Regina. In Regina, there's a studio. And in that studio, there are, at least once a month, a bunch of skeptical atheist geeks and goofballs who get together to do a podcast. We are the Brainstorm crew, and we're trying to help spread a bit of reason and critical thinking while still having fun. Never taking things too seriously, but still not accepting everything we're told. We go through different topics, exploring them in depth, and often disagreeing. We try to stick to provable facts, and we never trust in myth. That's why we say we're woo-free since 2013. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker under Brainstorm, or check out our website, brainstormblog.net. I can't promise you'll always agree with us, but I can promise you'll have fun listening to us.
I'll play devil's advocate for a second, because what we've been saying about, like, we can look at whatever disagreements we have with Clinton and say, like, yeah, those things kind of leave a bad taste in our mouth, and we're not super happy about that. But Trump is, I mean, it's almost not even an exaggeration to say that this guy's an existential threat.
Yeah.
Given the way that, the bravado that he's talked about China, and about, other countries and immigrants and so on and so forth.
The whole thing with Russia recently, he's been encouraging Russia to hack into government emails, which is basically treason.
Right. So it's not really exaggerating that much to say that this guy could be an existential threat. What I hear from the other side, because I do hear a lot of, we'll say people of privilege saying like, well, Hillary's just as bad as Donald Trump. And my immediate response is like, shut up. just stop. But when I hear people of color who come from poor communities say something like that, I have to listen a little bit more closely to that, because we have the first 8 years of the first black president, and things have not really gotten a lot better for a lot of those folks. So
that's because he's just been so divisive along racial lines, and he's causing a race war and war against police, right, Callie? Right,
exactly. So and I don't know that argument completely convinces me, but it's something that I feel like I at least have to listen to and give consideration to, because in my mind, when I hear that, what I'm hearing is that I am so worried about this because Trump is a direct threat to me. As a queer and transgender person, Trump is a direct threat to me. I don't feel like John McCain or Mitt Romney were a direct threat to me. Definitely wouldn't have been the happiest thing, but I don't feel like it would have been a real threat to the quality of my life to have either of those people elected. So it was easy enough for me to say, like, yeah, I'm going to vote for the Democrat, of course, because I think he's better, blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm not going to like cry myself to sleep if the Republican gets elected. But now, because Trump is a threat to people like me, I care more. And so it really inspires more of a thought in me when I hear people, people who aren't just like, I know nothing about politics, I'm, relatively privileged, whatever, to hear somebody like that say like, well, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are the same, blah, blah, like, shut up, just stop. But when I hear people who are, in the thick of things like that say that, it's something that I at least have to stop and take notice of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, largely what you're hearing from those communities is you're hearing about people talking about the legacy of the drug war, specifically the legacy of the drug war continued by Bill Clinton during his presidency that was started by Bush Sr. And you actually made a really good point, which I'm going to sound a little bit mean-spirited when I point out, but it's true and needs to be said. If you haven't been following politics until this year, until the scrappy Jew who wants to give everybody free college showed up, that's great. I'm glad you're involved now, but some of us have been here for a while. And while I totally understand it's great to take Hillary Clinton out of context 2 decades ago or a decade ago and make her the villain of today, that decade or 2 decades really do matter. And if you look at her behavior since then, she has been actively and, more importantly, successfully working to repair the mistakes that the party has made in the past. One of the things that is a huge difference between Hillary, and I do want to comfort some people out there who are scared about Trump. Trump will not succeed in doing any large-scale nuclear war-causing incidences. He will most likely hand over the majority of the presidency to Pence, who will be terrible for social policy,
which is terrible for you, horrifying.
But yeah, absolutely,
and terrible to the queer and trans community. It might even be worse to have a Pence in charge than a Trump in charge.
Oh yeah, this is the person who looked at the NBA and was like, "No man, no dice." And the NBA was like, "All right, too much for us." That's when you push the NBA too far into bigotry, that they're like, "All right." And so the simple matter is, this doesn't, and I try to say this without being too mean, but this doesn't affect me. I'm a upper middle class white comedian who, if my soon-to-be wife ever needs an abortion, I can fly her to England and get her one. All right. And the flashback from Trump's presidency, or more likely Pence's, will be good for me because everyone will be so mad about Trump that they'll start turning away from religion. More people will listen to my show, more patrons for me. Yippee-ki-yay. The only reason why this concerns me is for the people I care about who this will harm, and you two are perfect examples of this. There is no question that a country that already tolerates more bathroom bills than we ever should have in this day and age will grow exponentially worse under an ideological Trump presidency. Just as Obama managed to hold back much of the tide over his 8-year presidency, Trump will be able to release that tide in a way that's really dangerous and scary. And this is the real thing to think about when, if your friend says, convince me to vote for Hillary, Hillary is gonna crush balls. She's been doing this for 41 years. And if someone shouts liar during her State of the Union address, she's going to make them eat their own dick. Obama had a legacy. He did. He's the first black president. And there was only so controversial and so hard-headed he could be. And towards the end of his presidency, I think he got a little bit better about that. But he had a legacy to manage. Hillary Clinton will get things done because she has that big donor money, because she's part of the corporate system. And I'm sorry, if you're looking for change without use of the system, you've never done anything or made anything. My show doesn't exist without Libsyn. If Libsyn tomorrow is just like, you know what? Half of our money goes to Philip Morris cigarettes. I hate cigarettes and I don't like them being sold to kids, but it's part of the damn system. And I hate to be defeatist like that, but the party that's proven itself to be most willing to change is the one that wants to elect the first woman president of the United States. And to act as though you can't tell the difference between that party and the party that held an all lives matter call and response chant with a preacher during their rally is just vastly intellectually dishonest. And I think we need to start acknowledging that.
Thomas, your thoughts?
Just compare the two conventions. I mean, my God, who we don't all believe in. But anyway, I cannot believe. Okay, the best tweet I saw that summed it up was, I think it was like a day and a half into the DNC. I saw a tweet that was like, wow, it's almost as if Hillary knows people that aren't her kids or people who work with her kids. Because like, that was the entire RNC was Trump's kids and / people you've never heard of / D-list, like D-list
head
celebrities.
Of SPLC hate groups.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. You know. People that you're like, who is it? Who is this? Who is this? Who is it? Oh, I see. They're that hateful. Big. I get it. Whereas Clinton had, I mean, just the production value alone. Forget about even the content. Look at the difference in quality in those two events and apply that to how it would apply to the presidency. I mean, that's something you could think of in and of itself. Like, the Republicans threw a shit convention that was pathetic. It was embarrassing. No one was there. It was a bunch of people no one's heard of.
Well, yeah, because they legitimately had trouble finding people who wanted to speak.
Right. But even so, I feel like a good problem solver and someone who was maybe someone you'd want to put in executive power would have been able to find a way. Whereas, Trump or maybe Trump's kids who are probably doing the whole thing weren't able to. It was a piece of junk. And contrast that with the DNC, which was a really well done convention, even by an objective standard of just production value, like not even looking at the content. And that stuff applies to how competent someone is going to be as a leader. I really think it does. Like it's decision making. And I thought, seriously, the Republican convention was a joke. Furthermore, I remembered something I wanted to say about looking back, 20 years on Clinton's, Hillary's words or something and taking it out of context, which I think Eli put really well. Why don't we look at, if we're going to do that, let's look at Trump's words from 20 years ago or 25 years ago when he was...
Words from 2 days ago.
Well, that's true, but even he has tightened up a little bit. And back in the 90s, he was talking about women need to have dinner made for him when he gets home, otherwise he's going to throw fit. Just all this misogynistic stuff nonstop. Do we have the equivalent from Hillary? Do we have that, like, she's being hateful toward men or something? Or do we have those quotes? No, because she's
there's the super predators thing.
She's in a different range of quality, though. I'm not saying she's great. She has flaws, but the range of flaw that she has is just her worst moment is so much better than Trump's best moment. It's not close.
This is the thing that totally baffles me about Trump is that there are, politicians always have these scandals, like they do one little tiny thing wrong, or even they didn't do anything wrong, but it appears that they did something wrong, and people are flipping out and saying, oh, now their chances are all ruined. And Trump does this on a daily basis, and it's like, it doesn't hardly even make the news anymore. Like, I don't understand how we got to this point.
Well, this is a guy who literally said at a campaign event, I could shoot somebody dead in the middle of the street in broad daylight and it wouldn't change my poll numbers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because he's not a politician, even though he is now a politician, but he's not a career politician. He's a reality TV star and a businessman. I don't know if people are like putting him in a separate category of what behavior is acceptable for him.
Yeah, they are.
Like even the people that support Trump all the way, he says all this stuff and it's like, oh, he's just speaking his mind. It's okay. And then if Hillary says like the tiniest thing that might be factually incorrect, they're like losing their minds over it. So why? How is this happening? I really don't understand it.
I think it's two things. I think it's one, he's saying a lot of the people who actively support him have come right out and admitted this. He's saying the things that so many people have wanted to say but have been afraid to thus far. Because, we obviously live in an incredibly racist society. Like, I think that's granted. But there is a certain level to where it's impolite to act as such. You can't express those ideas because there's a social taboo against it. And there are people who are pissed about the fact that social taboo exists. And you have Donald Trump, who, you have all of these Republicans for so long who were dog whistling on race and on gender and on economics and immigration. And they're sort of doing this subtle sort of call out. Whereas Donald Trump is just taking it over the top and be like, yeah, you know what? Mexicans are rapists. And everybody's like, yeah, you know what? Like, I've been wanting to say that for a long time now. I just haven't had the courage to. Now I do because I have someone who's really popular in, a famous person validating the way that I feel. So right. I think that's side one of it. And I think side two, the rank and file Republicans, who I think, generally speaking, in a vacuum where Hillary Clinton doesn't exist, would probably be just as disgusted by Donald Trump as any of us are. They've bought so much into the vitriol about Hillary Clinton. And you know what? Well, we've had a black president for 8 years, and I'm pretty pissed about that. If we elect a woman, holy shit. You know what I mean? They've bought into this thing where they hate Hillary Clinton so much that they're willing to ignore everything that Donald Trump says, and they'll pick out like the one or two little nuggets where he's said something that maybe starts to sound substantive, and they latch onto that and say, yeah, that's why this guy can be president. I really think that in most cases it's one of those two things.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't even think I'll take it a step further. From the Republicans I've heard from, a lot of interviews during the convention and stuff, they won't even really say, like, I think this guy should be president. Like, even people who are endorsing him, I think I saw an interview with the guy who's the head of, like, I think it was like the Family Research Council or one of those god-awful groups. Even he was like, well, people would ask him, so do you support Trump? Well, we can't have Hillary be president. It's like there's no...
Right.
They have no, like, they don't even want to back him, really. And one key is one thing that I think we've kind of talked around a little bit, but I want to directly say, look at the amount of people of color in the RNC versus the DNC. And you said it. I think you're right. That doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean everything to, have a minor representation or whatever. That doesn't mean we've solved all the problems. But when you've got the RNC, which has a record low in black support and black delegates, and then you have the DNC, which was just a rainbow of different people of backgrounds and different qualities and all this stuff, lots of diversity. It doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean they're solving all the problems, but it's sure a hell of a lot better than something that looks like a Klan rally and has no representation from people of color. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, and that's something that I kept thinking when I was watching these speeches, and like let's let go of the cynicism and let's just look at this moment in time for a second. And they've got cameras panning all throughout the crowd, and they've got a mother with her little girl, like adorable little girl wearing a dress with braces and everything, and like she's looking up there, and she actually now like understands that that's a thing that she could do if she wanted to. I see a transgender person up there, and I think, my God, like this is a party who not just acknowledges the fact that I exist, because that's obviously not enough. The RNC acknowledge that we exist, but these are people who are but these people actually put our issues, maybe not center stage, but LGBT inclusion was a huge part of the convention. And it means a lot to me. I'm not ready to give them a pass, just because they had a trans speaker and they had some queer speakers, and they're talking about our issues. But when marriage equality happened, there's a radical activist that I follow who is, just the epitome of like, I'm never happy with anything because everything's problematic. When marriage equality happened, he posted something like, I had no idea this was going to affect me this way emotionally. Like I didn't think that I was going to even care all that much about this, because marriage is so far from, the thing that we need to be the most concerned about when we've got, legalized discrimination and record levels of violence and so on and so forth. But when you see the president of the United States endorsing gay equality or talking about trans issues, that's a big fucking deal. And I really, like, I was sitting there, I was kind of crying through some of it, especially watching Sarah McBride, the trans woman who spoke, like, just, because that's one of the things that we fear when we come out is, what limits is this going to place on what I can do in life? Because people won't even give me the time of day to do the things that I want to do. It doesn't matter how good I am at it. It doesn't matter how hard I've worked. I'm not welcome because of who I am. And to now see that that's possible, as much as I sometimes am that person that's like, everything's problematic and I can never be happy about anything, I had to take a look at that and just be like, fucking wow. Like that actually just happened.
Yeah, well, I think representation is huge. I think it's easy for me, again, cis, white, blah, 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 to say, like, stop being cynical. But I do think we can be a little less cynical, because visibility makes a huge difference. Like, just being able to see, oh, that's a trans person? Oh, okay.
Just as long as it's not Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
God, if she was spoken at the RNC.
Oh my God.
I can't stand Caitlyn Jenner, but even then, that at least makes you, maybe that even helps it more, because she's a Republican. That makes Republicans say, like, okay, maybe that's not as bad as I thought it was. Like, it maybe makes people question these deeply held convictions that they had simply because they had never met or interacted with a trans person or a gay person or whatever. The visibility does count for a lot. I think we can be a little optimistic, cautiously optimistic, if you will, that makes a difference.
And to add to that, I would say to the protest voters, the way to change a party is from the inside. And Bernie Sanders is an amazing example of that. Bernie Sanders pulled the platform so far left. He pulled the political consciousness so far left this year. So, if you look at the Democrats and you see progress but not enough, the answer is to get involved at a local level. Because if your answer is to vote for a third party that in a best case scenario will become a misanthropic distraction in 4 years, then you don't really want change. And if you're too busy to help out with the Democrats, which I am, like, I'm too busy. I can't go and run for state senator. I can't run for local whatever, right? I can't get involved with the DNC to the extent that I can make the change. So if you can't make the change from the inside out, then you need to fall in line with the people who are doing it. You don't get to be the radical and not foresee any change, because then you're just a misanthrope and you destroy the people and you stop the people who are trying to make that change a reality. So, as mean-spirited as it sounds, because people really want to think that their vote matters, it doesn't. It doesn't. Your actions matter. And if if you can't contribute your actions, which not everyone's in a financial position to do, not everyone's in an emotional position to do. Again, I'm not in that position to do it, so I completely understand. But then your vote actually becomes your voice. And if you use your voice to protest in a way that you know will not enact change, but rather put despots in power, then you've sort of missed the whole point. You can't have your rebellion cake and eat it too. And just, again, I bring people back to the fact a Democratic Socialist joined our party this year with no notice, with no transition. He walked into the party and we pivoted with him as a group. We pivoted with him and valued the things he valued and started talking about the issues that he talks about. And for us to do that, when you look at the difference even between Obama during the last election and what Bernie's talking about during this election is just a huge pivot. There's huge potential for change, but the way to push a movement left is not to leave it. Again, we none of us here, I think, sort of agree with atheism plus. And to me, the Green Party and the Libertarians, they're the atheism plus of politics, except they're much, much more dangerous because it's like people got to vote whether or not religion or atheism wins once every 4 years.
Yeah.
Here's an excerpt from Mum, Dad, I'm an Atheist by David G. McAfee.
It is the same highly regarded concept of an afterlife that allows misguided religious people to justify the mistreatment of those who disagree with their religious ideologies. They are simply trying to protect you from eternal damnation in the afterlife by condemning you, insulting you, and even disowning you in this life. It is not to say that becoming open about your disbelief is always going to be met with these negative reactions, and, in fact, that is precisely what this work is hoping to prevent. But it is important to understand that if you experience negative reactions from religious kin, it is probably a result from the religion's teachings, and likely not from any personal vendetta or hatred.
Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist by David G. McAfee is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends. In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today?
The only thing I didn't learn
is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. Thank you so much for contributing to the show financially and for believing in us enough to support our mission to smuggle penises into women's restrooms and to force every American into their very own mandatory gay marriage. Head over to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto to find out more. Thank you. You said, the way to think to make change is from within. And I think the other important thing is that change is also bottom up, not top down.
Right.
And I think one thing that I feel like there are a lot of people who are really, really excited about Bernie who, because Bernie didn't win, are now just going to step away and not really participate in politics anymore. And if that's the case, then you never really got what Bernie was about in the first place.
And then you never cared in the first place. You just had a contestant in American Idol that you wanted to win. You didn't care about the show.
Exactly.
Is this a no true burner fallacy? I feel like it's a no true Berner fallacy. You're not a real Bernie supporter.
It may be. I don't know. But the fact is, Bernie Sanders is still in government. We still have Elizabeth Warren, and those people can make change inside a Hillary Clinton presidency. It's not like all is lost because we now have to work towards electing Hillary Clinton instead of Bernie Sanders. And so what I think we need to see, because there are people who want to elect a candidate like Bernie Sanders, then awesome. You know what? Let's get Hillary Clinton elected and stave off the destruction of the country. and then
let's make sure that we still have a country to vote for next time around.
Right. And let's get back to working toward the progressive change that we want. Let's, to the extent that we all have the capacity to be involved, and Eli, I think you put that really, really well. Not everyone has the capacity to, be on the streets at city council meetings and all of this sort of stuff to agitate for change. And I think that's okay. I think it's the same conversation we have about activism all the time. You don't have to be the person on the front line screaming and shouting with a protest sign for what you do to matter. If you've got an extra $5, donate it to a candidate that you really like. If hey, you know what? I've got an hour this Sunday. Let's figure out where I can volunteer. That kind of stuff. Really simple, grassroots. You don't have to uproot your life to be an activist. And I think that follows in this. The problem is our system, for better or worse, is set up for very slow incremental change. And I think we can have a very spirited discussion about whether or not that's a good thing. But the fact is, that's the reality we have to work inside of at the moment. So yeah. I think we can work in the system trying to make things better in the system while we try to change it as well. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive.
Absolutely. The time to do that is in the primary process and before the next election. That's when we need to do it. And if someone here's another thing I'll say. If someone calls you, if a pollster calls you and says, "Who are you supporting?" Tell them Gary Johnson. Get Gary Johnson in the debate or whoever it is, get Jill Stein in the debate. It doesn't mean you have to vote for him, but there's things we can do to try to improve the state of our, two-party dominance system. But the problem is that that's not now. Letting Trump get elected doesn't increase the chances that we'll have a viable third party. It just doesn't. And the time there's a couple things I wanted to say about this. So in the primaries, another thing to notice is young people are the ones who went for Bernie overwhelmingly. So you can be positive about the future of the party. Imagine 8 years from now. 8 years is a long time. Maybe that'll be enough for the demographics to switch to where the younger people who are supporting a progressive candidate like Bernie will be the majority of the party, and then all of a sudden that's the new normal. It's not. It was pretty close. He got a lot of votes. And the other thing is, I also think I also supported Bernie. I think it sounds like we all did, I guess. I would say we also need to be careful about painting too rosy a picture of Bernie. He has his flaws. His stance on GMOs is terrible. He's been nonstop advocating for GMO labeling, which is actually a really harmful thing. It really is. And people could easily do the same thing where Bernie is just as bad because of this thing, and then close their ears to all the other criticisms of other candidates, which is what they're doing with Hillary. And he also has some economic policies that are pretty unrealistic. There's a lot I liked about him. Again, I voted for him in the primary, but I think he had a lot of views that you can make them out to be a lot better than they were. I think he had some policy ideas that weren't quite fleshed out. And again, his stance on GMO. So he's not some sort of god, it's not, he has his flaws too, as much as I love the guy. And I really appreciate how he has come out for Hillary, and accepting defeat. It's really great. So overall, the time to make change happen is in the primaries. Next primary, go ahead, rally support for a third party. Do it ahead of time. Do it, get the representation, get them in the debates, that's what you need to do, but it's too late now. Now it's Hillary or Trump. That's what it is. Hillary or Trump. Accept it. And who are you okay with being president? Are you really going to be okay with the possible, really, I agree with whoever it was who said he's legitimately an existential risk. I think he is. I really think he is. So are you okay with that because you want to try to get like a third party to happen at an inappropriate time, which, after it's too late for that to happen in this election?
Yeah, I think one of the ideas that, going right along with what you just said, I think one of the ideas that we would all do best to completely rid ourselves of is the Messiah complex with our political candidates, because so many people who were behind Bernie, they would just keep talking about how, Hillary Clinton used to be against marriage equality. And you know what? Bernie made an argument against it once too. It was a lot longer of a time ago than Hillary Clinton's was. But, he actually had the libertarian position that it was a states' rights issue at one point. You know what I mean? So it's like, if we're going to go there, if we're going to say, this thing that you said in the past, because I think it was, I think the 90s was the last time Hillary Clinton said anything against marriage equality. If we're going to go there, and if we're going to act like the past happened yesterday, we have to be equally willing to apply that to our candidate. And we can't just say something like, well, he marched with Martin Luther King, so he can't possibly have wrong ideas about civil rights. Like, we have to let that stuff go. We can't do that. We have to be skeptics, and we have to be willing to honestly examine those things and look at the people we agree with and say, you know what, Bernie's my guy. I voted for him in the primary. I wish that I would be able to cast a ballot for him as the Democratic nominee. And I'm really bummed that he's not, but we lost. It would be a different story, I think, if I could look honestly, not just at the individual candidates and Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, and say, you know what, they may be different, but they're kind of equally distasteful. I think if you can take an honest look at those things and not recognize the huge difference, I just have to question how much effort you've put into informing yourself on these issues. But taking it down ticket and looking at the Republican platform versus the Democratic platform. We basically have the most anti-woman, anti-LGBT, anti-fucking human decency Republican platform we've ever had versus the most progressive Democratic platform we've ever had. And then you look at things like the fact that David Duke is running for Congress now because, quote unquote, the winds have shifted in my direction. That's code for Donald Trump. He's being openly racist, and he got the Republican nod for it. Being openly racist, being openly misogynistic, he got the nod largely because of those things, not in spite of those things.
Yeah.
So my worry is, even if we forget about the candidates, forget about the platform, and we look at the message that this sends, if we elect a Donald Trump to be president, is we are giving the biggest validation we could possibly give to people who are openly racist, openly misogynist, openly anti-immigrant. I can't imagine how emboldened these people will feel to not only harass and make life difficult for people of color, for LGBT people, for any marginalized people, that we're actually talking about violence. We're talking about a body count because these people realize, you know what, the country agrees with me now, so I don't have to keep my bigotry in hiding. And that to me is sort of what's at stake here. If I'm speaking about what's at stake for me personally, because there have been times, I'm at the grocery store and I see somebody looking at me and looking at my girlfriend. And there was a time I legitimately, I'm just going to tell this story because this is what I think of. Every time I think of Donald Trump becoming president, this is what I think of. So my girlfriend and I are at Walmart, probably our first mistake being at Walmart, but we'll let that go because it was late at night. So we're checking out and I catch this lady sitting on the bench behind the checkout. And she's just staring, unabashedly staring, just looking with the most contempt and disgust I've ever seen on anyone's face, staring at me and staring at my girlfriend. Her boyfriend comes over after he's done checking out, boyfriend, husband, whatever. After he's done checking out, they commiserate for a second and he's looking over at us now. And I'm like, oh shit, what's about to happen? So they start walking towards the exit. And as they're walking by, the guy starts to steer his cart towards my girlfriend. and he's looking at her. I mean, daggers in his eyes. It's the first time I've ever been confronted with that kind of thing personally, and I cannot convey to you how shocking it is to actually see that kind of hate on someone's face. And I legitimately had to be like, do I need to step in front of her? Because, like, is this guy about to do something? And he turned and walked away. So nothing bad happened. But imagine those situations under a Donald Trump presidency where someone feels like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I mean, frankly, a lot of people who do that kind of thing get away with it anyways. But people who feel like I can do this and I can get away with it because this is where we are as a country now. That's the thing that scares me. That's the thing that literally keeps me up at night about the prospect of a Donald Trump presidency.
You're 100% right. It's horrifying. And the fact that it won't come to your door, and the fact that you're upset right now and you're hurt right now and you wish we lived in Europe and you wish we had a better political system is no excuse to embolden the people who will hurt the ones you care about. And if you're listening to this show, two of the people you really care about will be genuinely hurt by this.
Care about us.
Yeah.
Right.
And
unless there are people who listen to the show because they hate us. I mean, that's, I figure that's a possibility.
So if you're mad at me because of all the mean anti-Green Party stuff I said, keep in mind that voting for the Green Party doesn't matter to me at all. Nothing ever matters to me.
Eli and I will be fine, actually. We'll be better off.
Fine. We'll be better. Yeah. We will literally be better because I'm a comedian, and when evil reigns, people need to laugh at the clowns. It will be better for me. And so, if you want to get back at me because I said Jill Stein doesn't approve of homeopathy and they're just a distraction party, go ahead and vote for Clinton because that'll put a sky in my eye.
What?
I don't know.
Literally never heard that term before.
Sky in the eye?
Yeah, no? I don't know what that means.
Yeah. It's a new thing I'm coming out with. SkyInYourEye.com.
Well, that is all the time that we've got. Thomas, why don't you tell us about your show? Tell us where people can go out and find you.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to. Atheistically Speaking, you can always Google it. You can. I think if you go to iTunes and just type like atheist, then it'll come up because I don't think anybody else has an I after the. So do that. Check out the show. I highly recommend President Trump again if you want more of this kind of thing. But also I like to talk about lots of different issues and get all sides on it. And this is the issue where I am the least fair. I'll just come right out and say it. Like this is for me. This is a no nonsense issue. Like I can't even imagine not, supporting Hillary. But most issues, I'm actually really balanced about it, and I like to look at to both sides and have guests on who will give me both sides of the argument. So that's what I like to do on Atheistically Speaking, and I encourage people to check it out.
Very cool. Eli?
On the Scathing Atheist, God Awful Movies, and The Skeptocrat, which you can find on iTunes. By the way, we are adding an I at the end of Scathing Atheist now, so if you're looking for it, there's an I, the Scathing Atheisty. But that's tonight, as soon as I get off this call, so don't worry about it.
Oh my God, wait, I have a great story to tell. Okay, so if people who listen to Cognitive Dissonance are going to really like this. So a lot of you know that I really like the show Be Reasonable with Michael Marshall.
Oh, I love that show.
I was listening to an episode, and I wanted to post a link to it on my Facebook. So I went on Google, and I started to type in Be Reasonable, and I got Be Reasonable, and I didn't put the E in, and it auto-completed with Be Reasonably Skeptical. I was like, fucking amazing, yes! Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Atheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. Wanted to say thanks again to my guests. Great conversation. Lots of good stuff. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/thegatheistmanifesto. You can email us at thegatheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I am on Twitter at GatheistCali. The show is at The Gatheists, and I hate Ari.
There once was an NB named Ari, whose Facebook updates were bizarre. And if you want email, it's aristillman4@gmail. That's it, and I'm not even sorry.
If you want to support the work we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegatheist manifesto, make a per episode donation to support the production of the show and the activism we do. If that's not doable, you can go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. That helps us get heard by lots more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, You need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Atheist Manifesto.